Hello, everybody. Welcome to Wake Up Wednesday. We're just going to wait for Lisa to sign on here. And as she does, I'll just explain a little bit about our Wake Up Wednesday. So Lisa and I do these every other Wednesday, and we flip-flop accounts. And Wake Up Wednesday is all about staying awake in our waking dream, meaning we bring what's in the unconscious to the conscious realm of our minds, so that we can live a life fully awake, fully embodied, fully integrated, and really be in our power and deep understanding of self, of all the aspects of our being. Hi, Melissa. So good to see you here. We'll go ahead and just wait for Lisa to arrive here. Dang, I did it again. How do I undo this black dot on my face? Melissa, do you know? There's Lisa. So Lisa just has to request to be in the video. There she goes. All right, there you are.
Hi.
Hi, how are you?
So good. How are you?
I'm good, except I pressed on the, oh, it's gone. Yay. Did you see the black thing that I drew accidentally on my face?
Oh, you drew that. I thought it was like a filter
I didn't mean
with a black heart.
It's just one black heart, right there.
Oh my gosh.
Welcome. Well,
Thank
not
you.
welcome. This is our live together, but
Well, yeah.
welcome to my Instagram.
But we normally do it together, we're normally in person together, and we just had to be flexible today, and here we are.
Exactly. So, I love that. We just have to be flexible today. And sometimes that's just what you got to do. You got to move with it, got to flow with it. And we always make it work no matter what. So we are here for you, committed to our Wake Up Wednesdays, and super excited to have you all here. We've got lots of people joining today. And today's topic is coping mechanisms from our wounds. Ooh, a juicy one. This is something that I know both of us have been studying deeply in both of our education and the schooling and our own personal work that we do on this journey called life. So I'm excited to jump into it. How are you feeling about it?
I'm super excited too. I mean, when we were kind of diving into the ideas, it just reaffirmed so much with the polyvagal theory component that I researched so much. So I look forward to the way we talked about, bringing consciousness to the unconscious, coping mechanisms, and kind of just coupling the perspective in the work that you're doing along with what was revealed with polyvagal theory.
Yeah, exactly. So the approach that we're going to have today is explaining coping mechanisms that are coming from our wounds, which are going to be unhealthy coping mechanisms and usually unconscious. It's usually kind of on autopilot. It's like our go-to because it's something that we've developed in childhood. We're going to speak about what parts of the brains this reaction is coming from, or this behavior is coming from, and then what part of the nervous system it's connected to as well. So lots of juicy information today. And so I'll start out by saying, so when we develop coping mechanisms from our wounds, these are unconscious, and they're unconscious behaviors that we automatically go to in our lives when we feel uncomfortable, when we are in fear, or when we are being triggered. And all of these things, all of these ways that we show up that are coping mechanisms that are not the healthiest or in alignment with our highest good, once was alignment with our highest good, because what happens is they develop in childhood. They develop in childhood as a protective mechanism rather than a coping mechanism. And it just turns into a coping mechanism in adulthood, and it no longer is serving you. It no longer is protecting you. If anything, it most likely is holding you back in some way. So thought it'd be good to talk about the different coping mechanisms that we might have. Do you want to speak to any of those, Lisa? Like,
well,
what are some healthy, go ahead.
What I wanted to bring in strongly into the piece, because we're always talking about staying awake in our waking dream, is like the role that our nervous system has played, to speak to what you were just saying, the protect, like maybe when we're younger. It's like that part of our nervous system that literally, it's called the autonomic nervous system, because it has this automatic response that does not require our thinking mind. And so if we're looking through polyvagal theory, there's three spaces that we'll go through, and it's I can't say it. Hierarchical. Do you know how to say it, Nicole? There we go. It's got a hierarchy.
Say the word
too.
hierarchy?
Yeah.
Yeah, hierarchy.
I was trying to say something else, but hierarchy. And in the hierarchy, we move from, I'm just going to call it what it's called in the theory, ventral, which what I want you to think about is that's just when we're in a calm, connected state, like how you and I feel right now, most likely. Then stress or danger arises, and the biology responds to a state of stress, a sympathetic state, where we get really, really, really activated. I'm noticing your mom's comments, and I'm trying to understand what you mean.
I think she's asking, is it called anarchy? No, it's hierarchy.
Hierarchy, yeah, okay.
Yeah. I don't think she can hear.
So we go from this place of feeling connected and feeling calm, maybe where we start to sense danger. Now let's think about when we're a child, right? We start to sense danger. The nervous system responds to that. It activates us, and coping mechanisms get created in that space. And a lot of times we continue with them, and they're not always healthy, but they're very reactionary, right? And then that next stage that they get into, so that's the sympathetic. The third one is actually dorsal. And really what that is freeze. It's where a lot of trauma happens. It's where people get disassociated. So if we're just even thinking in our own life, and I was just thinking this morning, like just like what's happening politically and a lot of things that's happening in the economy and a lot of the fear that's there. And then I was thinking about our topic, right? I'm like, what are some of these coping mechanisms that we unconsciously go to? I mean, I know for me, it's more like a dorsal response, because what you know this about me already, but for the world to know, I really like to go towards disassociated states, and I'll find myself doing that. And how it shows up in the realm that I was just talking about is I stopped watching the news 20 years ago. And I noticed if I ever catch a glimpse of it, like one time I had to, I was at the gym in front of the thing, and the TV with the news was right there, and it was like in the beginning of Trump's election or whatever. After just being for 5 to 10 minutes, like I can feel my body go into this shifted state of activated, right?
Yeah.
Because I'm so sensitive to the fact that I don't watch the news. But anyway, I know I went on a tangent because I do that all the time, but
no, you actually just are blurry and are kind of going in and out.
Oh, I am? That's so strange.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I think, I mean, I got all that you said. I think our listeners got everything that you said. She was speaking to how our reactions are based on what part of our nervous system is really being triggered or at play or activated rather, and how it's very unconscious, it's very automatic. And so with that, it also brings us into the brain. So when we are in a state of reaction or dropping into an old pattern, an old coping mechanism that once worked for us as a child, it's coming from the limbic part of our brain, which is the survival part of our brain. So when you're a child and you develop this coping mechanism, it's for survival, because perhaps there wasn't the love that you needed, and in order to receive that love or that connection or that validation or that care from your caretakers or parents, you had to do this certain coping mechanism to survive in the situation or the environment that you are in. And so what happens is it becomes automatic now. It's based on survival. It's the reptilian part of the brain. There's no thinking. It's just happening. But when we get into adulthood, right, we have to learn about, okay, what are these ways and behaviors and coping mechanisms that aren't serving me anymore that I developed in childhood. And it can be difficult to look at because it uncovers and it unpacks a lot of stuff from childhood, developmental trauma and all of that. But when we understand it, we can move to the prefrontal cortex of our brain and start to create meaning and reason and healthy coping mechanisms and boundaries in our life that actually allow us to cope with things in a healthy way. So I wanted to drop into a little bit of what different coping mechanisms are as far as unhealthy. So Lisa, you spoke to one of them, disassociate, right? One big thing that we do is we disassociate. I know that is one of your forms that you drop into. I certainly can drop into that, or if not disassociating, then numbing in some way, right? Like checking out completely is a coping mechanism. Avoiding. You've seen me be in that state. Like if it's uncomfortable for me to face something or to talk about something in that moment, I want to avoid it until I'm ready. And sometimes that's very helpful, right? And if you think about that as a child, avoiding a situation that seems dangerous or scary is going to protect you as a child. But now in our adult state, we need to lean into those situations so that we can overcome them and find the lesson that is behind it, right? Go ahead. Did you have something to say, Lisa?
Yeah, I just wanted to say as a child, so back to those levels, and I don't know if I went in and out. Hopefully I was, there's these 3 levels in polyvagal theory. And the second one is the response to danger, which activates us. And somebody had put fight, flight. And then what happens is if at some point we feel like that we're not going to survive this thing, that's how it occurs. And as a child, it makes sense that as a child, you might not feel the capacity to be able to protect yourself enough. Then we go into that freeze state. And we go into that state where we start to disassociate because we don't feel like we can. So we almost have to check out because we think we're going to die. It's really
yeah, right. Exactly. When you're a child and you feel like you're losing connection or you're losing the stability that you need in your life, you really feel like I'm not going to survive. Yeah. Right. And so you do everything in your power to keep that connection, to keep that stability, to keep that sense of calm in your environment. And that might look like all these things: disassociate, avoiding, isolating is a unhealthy coping mechanism, overreacting to be heard, like being very overreactive to get attention, right? That's something
so right there.
Do as an adult.
Sorry.
Right? Say that again.
The overreacting is then the sympathetic state. So what I love about the nervous system is it brings it back to the biology. And just like you were talking about the limbic brain versus the prefrontal cortex, it's like basically we are reactionary. It's our nervous system. And some of those coping mechanisms, before we get into that dorsal disassociated state, it's going to be activated. So like you were saying, angry, anxious, irritated, frustrated, and all of the things that come in the bucket of that activated state.
Right. And then there's behind that, there can be this projection, right? I'm projecting my emotions and my feelings and my state of being right now onto you. And so I'm blaming you for this behavior and this reaction, right? And which we could still even be doing as an adult towards the people in our lives, towards our parents, towards our friends, whatever it may be. And the reason I keep bringing it back to childhood is because although we have these unhealthy coping mechanisms at play, and addiction is also a form of a coping mechanism, it can be food, alcohol, unhealthy exercise, whatever it might be, these developed in childhood. And so if we can have an understanding of that, I think that we can lean into it with more compassion, knowing that at one time that these did serve us and we're protecting our little self, our little heart. And if we can come at it with compassion, then everything can be seen through the lens of compassion, and we can allow ourselves to see the truth of what coping mechanisms are still running our lives that are not healthy or serving us. So when we can view it from that lens of, oh, I developed this as a young girl or a young boy, I think it can help us to move forward in developing healthier coping mechanisms, and also have a little bit more ease and freedom into looking into why it was developed, right? There's a reason, a deeper reason as to why it was developed.
Yes, and with polyvagal theory, another one of the tools is we have our vagus nerve and the vagal brake. And it's really about, how do I oscillate? If I go into that heightened state of being activated, or if I go into that dorsal state where I disassociate, how can I return back to a connected state, which is a present state, you know? And so the other thing that Deb Dana talks about that I really appreciate, and you had said something, I can't remember exactly what it was, but it's also the relationship of our nervous systems together. So talking about these coping mechanisms, we're always coping in some way with what's happening in our environment, right? Inner and outer. And then it's like, all of a sudden now I'm in presence with you, for example, right? And depending on what's going on with you and your nervous system, and then me and my nervous system, then there's this alchemical response that happens when we come together, right? So when we're more informed, and again, it always comes back to body awareness through the body, through the biology, it's just really powerful. And also that theory really helps remove shame, guilt, and a lot of those really negative feelings that we can start to have, because we understand it's our biology. And that, like you were saying, it was created in the past, in a younger version of ourselves, and we can always move towards positive change.
Yeah, exactly. And I love that we're able to blend, you know, the science and the biology of the nervous system and how that's developed, and then how we can also interweave the psyche and developmental trauma and behavior. You know what I mean? Because at the end of the day, it's not separate. It's all integrated. It's all related. It works as one orchestra within our being. And so to have these different lenses, these different viewpoints, whatever works for you, whatever feels right for you, whatever lens you want to take can help you in starting to strategize and create with the brain that does do that, the prefrontal cortex, to create healthier coping mechanisms. So with that, I'd like to offer some healthy coping mechanisms that people can start to lean into to move forward and become aware of what unhealthy coping mechanisms are in their life. So I think Lisa and I will both agree that one healthy coping mechanism is, you know, body awareness and body-based practices, any sort of movement to move the energy, to be present into what's happening in the body, what's happening in your emotional state, and how that emotion is showing up as sensation physically. And either one, being with it for a little bit of time and allowing it to be, and then perhaps moving the energy through physical movement, dance, yoga, breath work, that kind of stuff. Do you want to add anything else? I mean, I've got a whole bunch in my mind, but I want to give space for if you have any.
Yeah, absolutely. So because I do a lot with the polyvagal theory, you know, it's first I would say, I think it's important to first, like we always say, get clear, like what are these coping mechanisms? You know, what are my coping mechanisms? And addiction, there was something you had said, we can also be addicted to a stressed state. So being in a stressed state, as odd as it sounds, can actually be a coping mechanisms. So first, like just really being honest with ourselves about what we go to, if it's serving us, what the pattern is that leads us there. And then it's like, okay, well, if I was going to have a different coping mechanism, you know, what could I do? And so for me, coping mechanisms that would be healthy would be coping mechanisms that are going to strengthen vagal tone. And those would be doing things like, well, like what you mentioned, breath work, yoga, meditation, also a lot of cold therapy, different types of cold therapy is really good for your vagal brake. But, you know, practice, I think, is like the most important piece. It's not like I'm just going to take 3 breaths right now. It's like, I'm going to do breath work every day so that
Yeah.
when my nervous system is taking me up into a higher activated state or a frozen state, that because of all of that practice and all of that work that I've done, that now I can get my heart rate to come back down to a ventral vagal state where I can be in contentment and connection. And
Yeah,
I just
exactly.
want to say, little plug. If you go on YouTube and you find me on there, I have several presentations. If you're interested in learning more about polyvagal theory, maybe this is the first time you've heard about it. If you want to understand that more, go on YouTube, find me. I've got several free webinars that have a lot of great information on that.
Yeah, for sure. Check her out on YouTube. She's got a ton of information. She's been studying the polyvagal theory for quite some time now, and it's really fascinating and really is like life. So I highly recommend going and checking her out. And yeah, so like back to the coping mechanisms. Say your first reaction is to disassociate. It's knowing when the fear is there, learning to recognize the trigger, and instead of going right into disassociation, whatever situation or person that you're with, taking a moment to separate from that, right? So you don't go right into disassociate, like completely block it all out, but you separate, then you inquire and figure out what is it that caused the trigger, what is it that caused that fear to be ignited, and then return back to that situation, that person, with more clarity rather than a reactive state or a completely disassociated or avoidant state. So in that case, it might be, I need to call a friend that I trust to discuss this with. It might be seeking professional help, somebody who has worked with developmental trauma, coping mechanisms, polyvagal theory, that sort of stuff. So seeking professional help to help you in a safe container uncover and unfold where these are coming from. What is the root of these, right? Because we can't just cover them up with, yes, all these practices are great to continue with healthy coping mechanisms, but if we don't get to the root of it, it's just putting a little band-aid over it. And so we really want to get to the root of it, and usually we need assistance to do that. Gratitudes for my counselor, game changer. Yeah, exactly, Melissa. Time management. So there's multiple ways that we can where our coping mechanisms, and it might be in a stress environment, it might be an environment that makes us anxious, it might be an environment that creates sadness or depression. And so instead of feeling those strong emotions that are there, we'd rather do all the other things to disassociate from them. Bath is really great. Social support, social groups, like group containers are really beautiful for that support in creating healthy boundaries and healthy coping mechanisms with yourself and others. Yeah, I think, and trauma recovery is another one I thought of, like someone who understands trauma and can help you to find recovery in that. I
wanted to say something. I'm trying to remember what it was.
There's a lot.
Self-care. Self-care is really important. And when I say self-care, I don't mean going on a vacation. Of course, that's self-care and that's beautiful. But really what self-care is stress management. How do you increase your capacity, your window of being able to hold stress in a healthy way by making sure that you're tending to yourself on a regular basis, on a daily basis, with practices that are nurturing and nourishing your nervous system and yourself, so that you can have more of a grasp over your biology, number one, and your awareness, number two, and you're just really also tending to yourself in that way.
Exactly. Everything we just mentioned falls under self-care. Like a bath is self-care, and therapy is self-care, right? Going for a walk and earthing is self-care, and healing your wounds is self-care, right? All of this stuff falls on this under the self-care category, and that's going to be, I think, the first step to developing healthy coping mechanisms. So yeah, I hope that we're at time here. I hope that was helpful and interesting and all of the things. It's always a pleasure for us to be here to discuss this stuff. It's in our conversation all the time, in every moment of the day with myself and Lisa. And so it's really fun to be able to share our passion with all of you. And if you have any questions or comments, feel free to reach out to myself or Lisa at Limitless-U, just the letter U. And we'll be here in a couple of weeks on Lisa's Instagram with a brand new topic.
I'm really excited. I already know the topic. So I'm just going
do you want
to
to
plug
share?
it. Yes. What we're going to dive into is how myth lives in our lives unconsciously. And in honor of the month of February, we're going to integrate in, Nicole, I know you're loving this because you're like, where did this come from? We're going to integrate in the myth of Eros and Psyche. And so whether you're in a relationship or you're not in a relationship, this myth is all about love. And it's all about how it's playing out in your world. But we're not going to just focus on that myth. I mean, myths are constantly being played out in our lives. So it's like bringing consciousness to how is that happening and who, what are we doing now?
Everything. I feel like we're all unconsciously living a myth in some capacity in different aspects of our lives. Oh, I love this. Love this. But we hope that you'll join us in 2 Wednesdays. It'll be at 3:33 p.m. And we look forward to seeing you. Sending you lots of love on this beautiful Wednesday. Mwah.
Peace.
Bye, Lisa. Love you. Miss you.
I love you too.